budget meeting on 32 hours without sleep. You're a better man than I.
Timmy's got it all handled. Went through most of it when it came out on the 12th, but yeah.
I think Councilman Runyon is referring to me. Timothy James McLaughlin.
Are you wearing your Mickey Mouse ears tonight?
No, God, it's my pickleball shirt. I got this in Naples, Florida.
I got up at 6:30 this morning and I had to be in a class at 8 o'clock and it got done at 4:15.
Sounds like a personal problem to me.
I passed 94%.
That's good news.
Good. Had 2 or 3 people go to the hospital in the last few days, which has added to it. Mike Knopf, Point Man Ministries. He's at the VA hospital in Portland. Andy Schlangen from Norcor had a stroke and he's at OHSU. It's been a wild couple of days. What's that? We're not in the meeting yet. I'm gonna mute. Hello, Ms. Cannon.
Hello.
Alice, can you hear me? Okay. I want to make sure you can hear me.
Is Edie with you? Edie Gourmet? No? Okay.
Nope, not with me. There we go.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Kruger. I'm the city manager. And we don't have a chair to call our meeting to order tonight because that person is no longer on the budget committee. So I will call the meeting to order on your behalf, and then I will, excuse me, ask for nominations for a chair. And then once we have a chair, I'll let that person take over from there. So nominations are now open for a chair of the budget committee.
Julie, this is Darcy. And I believe there was an email that went out asking us to take a roll call before we elected the chair and secretary.
You're correct. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That. City clerk, would you like to call the roll? Sheila.
Scott Randall,
Present.
Darcy Long Curtis,
Present.
Tim McLaughlin,
Present.
Rod Runyon,
Present.
Dan Richardson,
Present.
Tanner Elliott,
Present.
Beatrice Olivan, Joe Barcott.
I'm here. I'm the guy whose screen says Maryland.
Oh, hi. Ben Ring,
Present.
and Debbie Ferrer.
It's Ferrer and I'm present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Mayor Mays is in attendance.
Thank you. We'll now have nominations for the chair.
I nominate Tim McLaughlin as chair.
I'd second that.
I nominate Rod Runyon.
Not today. I decline.
Are there any additional nominations? All right. All those in favor of Tim McLaughlin as chair, would you please raise your hand? Is that unanimous? Looks like that's unanimous. So Tim McLaughlin, you have been elected as the chair. And if you have your agenda handy in front of you, the next step is to elect a secretary, and I'll let you take over from there.
All right, election of the secretary. Do I have any nominations?
I'll nominate one of our new people, Scott Randall. Secretary is a very tough job.
I'd second that as well.
Well, we have a nomination and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Then can I have a show of hands or a vote? There we go. It looks unanimous to me. All right, so Scott Randall, you will be our secretary. All right, moving on. Budget officer's message for the fiscal year 2021-22.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to those of you who are new to the budget process. This format of the budget is the same as it's been for many, many years. We'd like to always start by acknowledging our finance director, Angie Wilson, and her staff, who does lion's share of the work on the budget, as well as all the department managers and their associated personnel. The budget message always begins with a section that summarizes the issues that affect the entire budget. These are the things that you want to keep in mind as we go through the budget process this week. Those are the fiscal policies that are involved in preparing the budget, the city's strategic plan, and then personnel issues. And then the next section will look at the major aspects of the general fund, followed by the major points of the public works and other funds. Each department has a narrative at the beginning of its budget, and then behind each department budget worksheet, you will find a detail sheet. So as you've been going through it, preparing for the meeting tonight, if you had any questions about a particular line item, you could just turn the page and see exactly what was proposed to be in that line item, which we think is really helpful to the budget committee because you can get those answers so quickly. You don't have to make a big list and wait for the meeting like we used to do in previous years. So our major fiscal policies reflect the council's goal of maintaining fiscal stability and enhancing coordination and communication with other local agencies. And those policies are to maintain an unappropriated ending fund balance that will equal 4 months of our net operating expenses for the general fund, maintain a contingency of at least 10%, the 5-year capital improvement plans, and an emphasis on maintenance and capital improvements to enhance our current assets and public works infrastructure. And if you're reading along, you'll see that each of those items has a budget issue paper attached to it, which are at the back of your budget book. And then we have the street department funding that includes revenues that are restricted by state law to the operation, maintenance, and construction of city streets. Those are different from the general fund. And then fees from our franchises, administrative transfers, and capital projects. This year, our legal services have been changed and we now contract for those services. So when we get to that department, our finance director will review that on behalf of the legal since we don't have a staff attorney anymore. The strategic plan is also included in your budget. The city council met in January this year and did some updates to that, and the items that they added that have a fiscal impact are included in the budget this year. And then the personnel costs are broken down into several categories. We have 2 bargaining units, one for our general employees and one for the police employees. We have a category of employees that are exempt from the bargaining units, and 2 contract employees, which is myself and the municipal judge. And then this year I added the council stipends, and I would just briefly touch on that this is something that is new this year. When we adopted the new charter, that was taken out of the charter that the city council could not receive any compensation. And while the council has not asked for this, I think it's very important. And one of the main reasons why I think we need to start by putting in a small amount is during one of our government academy sessions, I had a participant ask why we don't pay the council anything and made a comment to me that it seemed unfair because some people might not be able to afford to be on the city council. And I had never thought of that before. And then the person said there would be items like if you were a single parent, you might have to pay for childcare just to attend a council meeting. So it would be more expensive to be on city council than they were able to afford. And I thought that was a very valid point. So this year I started with a small stipend for the council and mayor, and I hope that the budget committee will approve that. Then we go to the general fund resources, which include property taxes, franchise fees, transient room tax, court fines, marijuana revenue, and financial services, as we do some financial services for the Parks and Recreation District as well as Maconia Fire and Rescue District. Then the next section also goes with a budget issue paper that just summarizes the expenditures and how they're broken down in this budget document. And then it talks a bit about some of the various departments, which we'll go through with you tonight and probably tomorrow night. The reserve funds, and then other funds, which includes the library service district fund, capital projects, and special grants. So we'll go through all of that with you. And then the summary is just saying that the total city budget is $73,650,000, which is about a 3.13% increase over last year's budget. This is the budget committee's job is to kind of take a policy level look, which is why it's so important that we put the policies in there so that as you're going through it, you can say, does this meet the city council's goals? Does this meet the fiscal policies and various things like that? And I think that's about it for that report. And then I'm going to, as part of my report, Angie was going to go over the revenues, right? Was it the revenues?
Yes, are we gonna certify the tax rate?
Well, did you want to do those part of my message though, or do you want to wait?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay, we'll wait on the revenues for now, and then Chair, unless there are any questions, I think we're ready to move on to item number 4.
I have a quick question, and that is, I don't see the Pledge of Allegiance on the meeting. Is it appropriate for this budget meeting to state the Pledge of Allegiance?
Well, we never typically do that, but we are certainly welcome to if you like.
I come from a tradition of doing that. So, Councilor Runyon, would you lead us into the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, we're moving on to number 4. Motion to certify City of the Dalles tax rate of 3.0155 per thousand of assessed value. I would entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved, and do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And who was that, please?
Barcott.
Got it, okay, and so that was Counselor Darcy Long Curtis, and that made that motion. So we have a motion on the floor. May I see a show of hands or affirmation? It appears that we have unanimous vote. All right, we're moving on to public hearings. However, I don't have the script to read, Julie. Is there something that I should read on public hearing?
Yes, that was actually sent out, but I can walk you through it as we go along if you like.
Yeah, is it in the packet or in the?
We sent it out by email today.
Uh-oh, well, I didn't open it up. So, yeah, lead me through it.
Okay. So your first public hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed budget. You just open the hearing, ask for a staff report, and then you call for testimony. And after the testimony concludes, you close that public hearing.
All right, steps again. I'm going to open this hearing, public hearing for testimony. What was the next step? I didn't write it.
Are you doing a staff report on that?
Untitled, yeah.
Okay, we don't have a particular staff report for this hearing, so you can go right into asking for testimony, and once there's no more testimony, close the public hearing.
Got it. All right. I will open this for public testimony regarding the proposed budget. I don't see any hands. Anyone? Oh, I see one. Ex-Mayor Steve Lawrence.
Hey, unmute. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Steve Lawrence, 2017 View Court, the Dalles, Oregon, 97058. First, I want to say this is a strong budget in a lot of ways, representative of careful work by Julie Kruger, City Manager, Rich Mays, Mayor, and Angie Wilson, Finance Director. I have a couple of areas I would like to comment on. Before the pandemic, downtown had been brought back from a dying town to a vibrant, energetic, people-filled, wonderful space. Now this old town is like a young person in our care, in need of nurturing and guidance and support. It will not be enough to set long-term goals and wait for the marketplace to self-rejuvenate. Small towns all over Oregon and across the nation are out recruiting, actively inviting new businesses, providing incentives. If we do not compete aggressively, we will be left behind. The Dalles is right now blessed with good, strong swaths of income, the result of careful planning, early success, and new government assistance. Yet I see little support for a robust economic development plan for the downtown. If the downtown dies, we are lost. I would like to point out some areas in this budget for your consideration. First area is economic development. The introduction specifies 27.5% increase and quotes a reserve for future expenditure fund to be saved an amount in the number of $2,625,912. The budget issue paper 21-005 transient tax has 219,338 set aside for other general fund activities. The budget issue paper 21-006 consulting for planning has nothing for economic development. Budget issue paper 21-007 under Public Works has a category Economic Development Sub-Department, but there are no direct services provided for these funds, yet 49,220 has been transferred to the general fund for economic development. Budget issue paper 21-012 enterprise zone fees has 405,000 from agreements 1 and 2 coming to the city. After commitments to the fire district for volunteers, 45,000, and fire tower department debt, 56,000, there is 315,000 remaining. Budget issue paper special grants notes March 2021, one half of the federal grant received, approximately 1,600,000 for use in aid to impacted small businesses, among other things, and for water and sewer infrastructure. From the beginning, your vision statement of the budget identifies a revitalized downtown and the Dalles as a commercial hub. Goal C, in fact, is to promote economic development opportunities, but nothing is specified. The only real statement about economic development is to conduct a market and an economic opportunities analysis to guide retention and recruitment efforts. Another study is not what's needed. There's also another study planned to develop new marketing materials for vertical housing and to visit urban renewal grants, but not to be completed until January 1, 2022. Citing from the March 2019 stakeholder meeting in downtown economic development, elements of a vibrant and successful downtown are active streetscapes, public gathering spaces, critical mass of businesses, mixed uses, retail and dining options, community and social organizations, arts and entertainment, landmarks and character architect. Some we have, the majority we do not. Today, there are many empty stores downtown. In 2019, there were close to 40, but by 2019, there were approximately 6 to 8, depending on when you looked. Now is the time to fill those stores again and to incentivize vertical housing. I personally know of a building owner who has been told by 4 prospective buyer lessees that the Dalles is not a consideration because the town looks like it's dead. Surely, with the money I have referred to, this committee can find money to provide incentives, rent relief, marketing, recruiting new businesses, and robust assistance for existing businesses now. The second area pertains to Goal A, citywide infrastructure. There's no statement about linking infrastructure to housing development. Even though not specifically required by House Bill 2001, I would like this budget and the city to identify gaps in its infrastructure and develop a plan to fill those gaps in conjunction with housing incentives and planning. The capital plan for public works, CIP 21-009, identifies $445,412 for future sewer projects and $245,000 for future stormwater. While I have not been involved in development of this budget and may have mischaracterized some of the numbers and areas, my message is clear. Please find some money for immediate rejuvenation and economic development of the downtown area through incentives, marketing, recruiting, and assistance to existing businesses. Please consider linking an infrastructure plan to housing development. Thank you. I provided a copy to Izetta in case you want a written copy.
Thank you, ex-mayor Steve Lawrence. Is there any other public testimony? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public testimony.
One more.
And yes,
Tim?
yes.
Some of the counselors may have a question of Mr. Lawrence.
All right, let's go back. Are there any questions of Steve Lawrence?
I got one.
All right.
Mr. Lawrence, are you thinking in terms of grants or loans from the city? What is your vision for how this money would be placed?
Well, first of all, I think the emphasis should be on recruiting businesses, identifying opportunities, and trying to fill the storefronts. That can be done by many ways. One might be a rent subsidy. Another might be loans. I think there are a variety of things to do, but right now, if somebody comes into town and says, I'm looking around to start a new business, where do they go? I really envision something that we used to do, which is identify a person or persons who would take that person in hand, make sure they know where the empty storefronts are, make sure they know if there are loans money that are available. And I know Urban Renewal used to give loans. If is there money through MCAD, if there are incentives that the city has put together. But I think there's got to be an aggressive plan which addresses all of those issues.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So
Councilor
do you
Runyon.
envision the city orchestrating this or simply providing the funds and having an entity like MCAD, for example, or the chamber be involved in actually distributing the funds out?
One of my discussions over the years has been that we have a committee under the chamber, which is supposed to be economic development. We have an economic development under MCAD. We have an economic development committee of the county. And we have a hat, one of the hats, 3 hats given to our new director of planning, who right now is, very, very busy looking at urban renewal and reconstruction of the housing code. I think there needs to be either a consultant hired, a person hired, or a committee put together to formulate a plan right away.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone on staff without going out for a consultant? Question.
I don't think you do.
All right, that's something that we would have to investigate. Julie, do you have any response to that?
We do not have that in the budget, as Mr. Lawrence just described. If we're directed by the budget committee and or the city council, we can try to put together a work group and get that going. What would have to happen probably later after the budget is adopted is we might have to have a budget amendment if we identify specific projects or programs that we want to do for this economic development.
Understood. Are there any other comments or questions of Mr. Lawrence? Now, seeing none, then I will now go ahead and close the hearing.
Thank you.
Public testimony, and we'll move on to section 5B. Public hearing to receive testimony regarding use of state revenue sharing. Is there a staff report?
Good evening. The public hearing to receive the testimony regarding the uses of the state revenue sharing, that revenue would go to the general fund if approved. And does anyone have a motion to recommend the proposed uses of the testimony?
All right. I'd like to go ahead and open for a motion to recommend proposed uses of state shared revenue to city council.
Mr. Chair, you
Yes.
need to please ask for testimony before a motion. Thank you.
Okay, we need to get testimony. I'd like to open this up to public testimony to see if anyone has any input. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close this section and move to entertain a motion to recommend proposed uses of the state shared revenue to city council.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move to recommend proposed uses of state shared revenue to city council.
Do I have a second?
Of the
Mr.
general
Chair,
fund.
Mr. Chair, this is Counselor Long Curtis, and I will
Yes.
second the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Scott Randall and a second by Darcy Long to go ahead and move this forward to a vote. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All
Chair
in-
McLaughlin?
Yes, yes,
I'm sorry, that motion should have said to recommend the proposed use of state shared revenue to the general fund, not city
Oh.
council.
oh, that's,
Apologize.
we'll strike that. I'm gonna reread that. This is a motion to recommend proposed uses of state shared revenue to general fund, correct?
Yes, thank you.
All right, that stands corrected. Now we can take a vote. All in favor, say aye or signify by raising your hand. All right, all, I see it, that's unanimous. All right, and now we move on to section 6, set future meetings. Do we have any proposed? That's what I see next. I hear an alarm going off.
I do too. We typically ask that the budget committee and staff be available for the entire week. And in general, we usually set at least one more meeting for Tuesday night and then Wednesday if necessary,
All right, and the same time,
5:30 to 7:30,
got it.
if that works for the committee.
Well, let's see if anyone has any issues with that. I don't see anyone. That would be
I have
tonight.
school budget committee tomorrow night at 6, so I can attempt to juggle both.
All right, we have one issue with tomorrow night. Anyone else have any conflicts? I would bring one up, but I think I'll let that one pass. All right. Then let's go ahead and we'll go as recommended by city manager, set tonight, tomorrow night, and if necessary, to move on to Wednesday if it requires it. All right. Anything else? Let's go ahead and move on then. We need to approve the minutes as needed.
We don't have any for tonight yet.
All right, then we will not approve those. All right, let's go on to budget presentation by fund. We'll start out with A as the general fund. Julie, I assume that's you, or?
Thank you. Our finance director will begin the general fund by going over the summary and revenue for you, and then we'll start in on the departments.
Good evening. I just wanted to kind of go over the whole budget as one, as a reminder, and then just as we go through the evening, it'll kind of help just kind of keep everything in line. Some of you guys have just a PDF document and don't have an actual budget book. And if you go to your index page and you toggle over the top of the index page and click on that, it will take you directly to that next page. So if it's, for example, if you're going to economic development, if you click on your index page, it will take you directly to the economic development. So that might be helpful as we get through the budget and get onto the pages. And then I would like to remind you that as you're looking at your budget, on the left-hand side, you do have 2 actual years of history. So we're looking at 1819 and 1920. And then we do have our approved budget of the budget that we're currently in of 2021. And then over on the right-hand side would be the proposed budget for this year that we're asking. And if you look at page 3, this is kind of a summary of what our general fund revenues are. And then if you look at page 4, where it's the colored items, this is our budget worksheet. And so the budget worksheet kind of gives a little more detail of what's actually happening within each line item. And the blue part section of it will give the breakdown of each one. So for example, the Wasco County planning share, it says the half of the senior planner, 1,215 acres where the initial UGA 973 have been annexed out, which leaves 242 available. So that kind of just gives that detail. And as we go through the budget, I'll go through the general revenues, but each department head will be going and will be talking to you about their budget. And so if you have any questions after we get each department head gets done presenting, feel free to ask those questions. So starting out with the general fund revenue, we have our beginning fund balance. And this year we're budgeting that it will be $5,027,513. And the beginning fund balance is an estimate. It is an estimate of what we think our projected revenues are going to be for the year and what our projected expenses are going to be for the year. And as we do our budget, our budget started in January. So we estimate out about 5 or 6 months of those revenues. So that again, that number can change. And it also, the beginning fund balance has the projected revenue, the projected expenses. It has our unappropriated ending fund balance, whatever's left of our contingency. And then last year, for the first year, we actually budgeted to have reserve for future expenditures. So it does have that number in it, which last year was, ended up being $1,698,860. That rolls over and becomes back into the beginning fund balance. So then we go through our budget, and we can also, this year again, for the second year in a row, we've budgeted for unappropriated ending fund balance, reserve for future expenditures, and our contingency. And I just want to remind you, as we go through the budget, our contingency, we always budget 10% of our appropriations. And we also budget 4 months for our unappropriated ending fund balance, our first 4 months of expenditures before our tax revenue comes in. Does anybody have any questions regarding that?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Angie and Julie. Can you explain, please, a little bit more about the reserve fund? Is that essentially a rolling capital projects fund? What is that fund for?
So the reserve for future expenditure fund is basically we do our 10% contingency. We do our 4 months of our first 4 months of our expenditures. And then whatever is left is what we've rolled into the reserve for future expenditure. By budget law, you're not supposed to put, you're only supposed to budget what you need for your contingency and your first 4 months for unappropriated ending fund balance. And then the reserve for future expenditures are usually reserved for future projects that the city might have in mind, that the project's not happening currently, that it, anticipated down the road.
Right. So we're saving for something. One example might be if we ever get to do the downtown utility undergrounding project. And then if you were on the budget committee last year, you may recall that we reduced that a little bit because we took the $500,000 out of that fund and put it into the economic recovery fund that we've been able to help businesses with all year. So the money is there, and then if we identify a project or program, we can move it back into the operating expenditures.
So that might be an appropriate place if we were so moved to fund a downtown economic development project or work group or what have you. That might be a place to take some of those funds from.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So let me ask this: why would it not be prudent to establish a sort of permanent fund, since we're not supposed to have a sort of contingency above and beyond our contingency? Why not have a sort of permanent capital projects fund or general fund reserve fund that we feed from this line item, so that in other words, instead of pushing it forward 1 year to the next, that if we have this unallocated excess, that it goes into a permanent fund that can be built up and then used when appropriate.
That's exactly what this fund is. So we can save it for projects or programs that we may need in the future. It's just like a reserve fund in the public works funds where they save for future projects there or future equipment needs.
But it shows up on our budget as part of our beginning balance. Does that give you any cause for concern? I merely mention it because our beginning balance is, a very significant portion of our general fund. It's more than a third of our total general fund. Do you feel like that could open us up to issues or critiques?
Actually, it would be my opinion that people should be proud of that. The fact that we're able to put some money in a reserve and be fiscally prudent and have the ability to do those projects in the future, or as we did this year, to be able to be so generous and help with all the economic recovery that we have in the years when bad things happen that we don't anticipate.
I mean, specifically as something that shows up on our beginning balance, as opposed to something that's off the balance as a permanent capital fund or, a similar sort of separate fund. You have to forgive me. I don't have the depth of experience, obviously, that you and many other people have. It just seems like a lot of money to be pushing forward without sort of any real purpose to at the moment.
Do you want to try to explain beginning fund balance and everything that's in it and what it's for?
So at the end of the year, whatever is left, it can be rolled over. So the reserve for future expenditures is, I think, Dan, what you're saying is that you'd like it to be committed to a project, and maybe put into a special fund to be saved, so it can't go back into whatever we want the next year. And so the reserve for future expenditure, it rolls over into the beginning fund balance. So you can ultimately, the next year be able to use it for whatever your needs are that next year, or you can put it back into reserve for future expenditures. And I think what you're saying is that you would like to have another fund established, so it takes that money out of the general fund, if it's not used that year, to be reserved in the future for capital projects only. Is that and not go into that in that beginning fund balance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's less an assertion than a question. And I guess I'd throw the question to some of the other folks that have, like yourself, that have a lot more experience. And I know government is not supposed to sort of save up funds just because, and yet it, just as random citizen, it does make sense to have a savings account. I'm wondering if a permanent fund makes sense where a certain percentage excess of the reserve for future expenditures fund would feed into to be held. So it's not necessarily, how does one say, loose money sloshing around in the year-to-year budget, but has actually sort of a permanent home that we could draw from.
Chair recognizes Councilman Rod Runyon. Do you have any comments?
Just try and get a handle on what you're really asking. Angie, it almost sounds more like a line item underneath, where maybe a percentage is picked out of that money, not necessarily rolling all funds that roll over into that category, but into a percentage of it, maybe into a line item that ends up doing what former Mayor Lawrence was talking about. Is that what you're kind of getting at, Dan? Because if it's a line item, we can move money around.
Rod, it's not actually a line item. So once you accept and approve the budget to be reserved for future expenditures, that money can only be touched by doing a supplemental budget. Right. It actually puts it in that money to not be spent. So the only way that you could get at it at that point in time would be to identify a project or a need and do a supplemental budget.
Okay. So it's kind of a rolling savings account in lay terms.
In lay terms, I think that's a fair assessment. And I think, you would see that fluctuate from year to year. For instance, if we have our big project for next year, that number is going to go way down, and you're going to see a different line item where we've identified where we're moving some funds to do that particular project.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this particular item? Then let's take a look. We've now reflected on pages 3, 4, and 5 of the revenue. I have one question on on proposed budget for the COVID grant that we received last year. What's the expectation moving on?
Are you in the city council budget now?
He's on page 4. So the state COVID grant, we did receive revenue this year. We're going to be receiving some federal funds this next year, and they're actually right now budgeted in Fund 18 that we'll get into later on during the budget.
All right.
Also, I just wanted to also clarify a little bit on the marijuana tax revenue. Measure 110 will be taking a significant amount of our revenue for marijuana this year due to rehabilitation for charges for like methamphetamine or whatever. It is now just a violation. And so when they come to court, they actually, they're going to be tried to be rehabilitated and be taking a drug class. So the money will be coming from the state. And so we will have a reduced amount, but I'm not really set on exactly how much because Measure 110 is just recently taken in effect. We also, just a reminder, we receive our state cigarette taxes and state liquor taxes. This is an estimate that comes from the League of Oregon City. And the transient room tax, that's above. We budgeted in 18-19, our actual was, just for that goes into the general fund was 824,988. In 19-20, it was 673, just because COVID did hit during that time. And then I'm estimating we budgeted 624,000 this fiscal year that we're currently in, and I brought that up in hopes that we would kind of be back to a normal economy at 742,000. But that is just a budgeted number. Also, I wanted to, if you go down more to the bottom of the page on page 4, the court fines and forfeitures, you're going to see a huge reduction of where we've been in the past. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are a municipal court, that we're not doing misdemeanors any longer. We're doing traffic court. Those revenue sources have depleted tremendously over in 2021, 19-20, we worked at really developing a system of collecting outstanding revenue that was sitting out there. So I am projecting that our revenue is going to be much lower this next year.
Understood.
The interest revenues are going to be lower than what's been in the past. LGIP interest rates have really taken a dive. And so I feel like our revenue source is not going to be as high as it has been in historically. And then on page 5, you'll see our transfers. And our transfers come from, just a reminder that you can actually see back on the appendices. And also we have a bit for that. We get our transfers by each different fund, like the library, public works. They basically are paying us to do their services. So our accounts payable, our accounts receivable, city manager, planning, all those items that we use out of the general fund, they pay us for services for that. And so that's where that revenue is coming from.
Understood. If we just back the bus up to page 4 for just a second, I see Lightspeed Network, Charter Communication, the Dalles disposal. These are franchise fees that we receive?
That's correct.
All right. Now, as we go back down through the marijuana, and I see 238,000 budgeted, but we won't get all of that amount. What will be, the state is taking part of that back?
I'm actually hoping that we will actually get that amount. And we originally budgeted 200,000 for our marijuana tax for 2021, but I think that number will be up higher, up to the current year. I feel like it might come in higher, but I'm anticipating and hoping, and I'm also going off of League of Oregon Cities of what their projections are.
Understood. Moving down, I look at, this is where docking fees under miscellaneous sales and services, 145 boats are scheduled, 135 to 15 to water fund, resale license, conduit fees. What is this about?
We always give the water fund $15 for the resale licenses and the conduits fees.
And $15 out of the 135 out of the 150 docking fee goes to the water in case they use our water.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's at the marina?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And I see no other questions on the next page. Does anyone else have any questions on the revenues before we move on? I see nothing. Therefore, shall we move on to city council budget?
Thank you. Just a couple of small changes in the city council department budget this year. Last year, you may recall, we budgeted 500,000 for economic recovery. This year, we budgeted 250,000 because we anticipate some ongoing issues, and that's already starting to come true. And then, as I spoke earlier, we added the city council stipends at $8,400. And under miscellaneous expenses, there's an extra $7,000 in that line item for expected costs during the recruitment for the city manager position next year. Most of that is going to be budgeted in the human resources department, but this particular part would be to supplement that, or maybe if the city council wanted to have some meet and greets or receptions or things like that for the candidates as we go through that process next year.
I see. Anything else on this, on page number 7? Hearing nothing, let's move on. Page 8.
That's the detail.
Details, all right. Any other questions on the detail? Do you see anything? All right, let's move on then. We're going on to city clerk. You have a report?
I believe our city clerk will give you a report.
All right. Izetta?
Good evening, Budget Committee. Thank you for coming and serving your community in this way. Gosh goodness. My budget didn't really change. I did add back some funds for training purposes to go to conferences with the professional organization that I belong to. But for the most part, it's pretty much stayed the same. Did you have any questions on it?
Anyone? Questions? This is on page 10 of our packet or our book. I don't see any glaring assets under 2,500 budgeted last year and nothing for proposed budget. That is at
That's
the
just
bottom.
computer,
Oh, I see.
laptop and computer. So I got new ones last year.
I see. Anyone have any questions on this particular page? And then on page 11 is just detailed rundown of everything you've looked at. I don't see anything glaring. It looks pretty much the same as the previous budget with minor changes. Anyone? All right, we don't have any questions. Let's go to the city manager report. Julie?
Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. I also don't have many changes to my budget at all this year. As you know, during the current year, almost every department let their training go because we were trying to do some budget cuts. So even though it shows what we budgeted for last year, that really isn't getting spent. So I've moved it over to do for the upcoming year. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I don't see anything glaring. Anyone else on page 14 and 15 of our packet? Did I hear someone? I don't see anyone.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Chair recognizes Councilman Richardson.
thank you. Julie and or Izetta, where's the line item for website redevelopment?
That is in the IT department budget.
Thank you. I knew I saw it, but just didn't remember where. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's, any other comments, questions on 14 and 15? Then let's move on. We're moving on to legal and judicial. Staff report on this.
Finance Director Angie Wilson will give you an overview.
Good evening. So the legal department, you won't see the salaries on there. You will see that we have the contractual services, and if you turn to page 18, it gives more of a description. We have our contracted legal services, which we signed a contract with them to for a salary stipend that comes out every month. So our contracted legal services will be $189,000 a year. And then we still continue to have outside legal counsel and consultants at $60,000. This is for specifically with the airport. And everything else has really been reduced on there, bringing our budget at 253,804. And so it kind of actually still falls way below what our actuals were for 18-19 and 19-20 when we had a staff accountant or legal services.
And that amount was actual 374,029 at
That's
that
correct,
time.
in 19-20.
And now it's 253,804 is budgeted for next year.
Correct.
All right. That is important to understand because that was one of the discussion items is would we have any savings by making this new development into legal services? So it looks like it has proven to be cost to a benefit to the city. All right, anything else on legal? We go to the 17, 18, 19. All right. And I'm looking at 20. And that concludes.
The judicial department has now been moved to the finance department, which is the next section.
Got it. Any other points of discussion for this legal section? I do want to report that it is working very well. Jonathan has done a tremendous job in working with the airport and getting it up to levels of some of the issues that we were facing. So amazing job that he's been doing. All right, let's move on then. We are in now finance, utility billing. Let's take a look.
So I think that the biggest change for me, this finances me, for me this next year would be the fact that we have contracted out with Parks and Rec and with the Mid-Columbia Fire Department. The Mid-Columbia Fire Department we took on in July. So we actually added a half FTE to help us with those services. And we are doing a tremendous amount of work and also looking at possibly going with Parks and Rec and helping them out with their payroll services. And so that's where you see in the finance, 442,000 on the personnel services compared to what we budgeted for 2021. But partially it will be on page 24 on the utility billing, there's actually a reduction because we moved those services over to the finance department instead of the utility billing to help with other stuff besides that. And other than that, I really don't have any big changes in either of the finance, the utility, or the judicial department. It's actually kind of a reduction for the finance. We're actually even reducing even more in the utility. It's gone up just a little bit just due to the assets that we have in the utility department this year. We have some replaced 2 desk computers as per the schedule that we have. And I think that's about it. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I do. Why would we do this? What benefits are there to the city for taking on payroll for those 2 entities?
I think that we are just trying to be a good partner and to try to help the fire department just due to the fact of there really isn't a lot of people that know how to do government accounting, and they asked us to be a good partner, and that's something that we took on.
And the revenue that we receive from both of those agencies helps pay for the staffing.
Got it. So it's not costing the city anything for taking on this project?
No, they're paying for the services.
Right. Councilman Runyon.
I'm just amazed. The finance department is so busy to take on outside work. I'm amazed you're feeling you can do that. But good for you, I guess.
All right.
Dan?
Any other question on this section of the budget?
A very brief one, Mr. Chair, if I could.
All right, you're recognized.
Angie, would you look on page 22 under accomplishments, under finance, and just very briefly explain the 6th bullet down?
So we received the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate Achievement for Excellence in Finance Reporting for the city's 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Yep.
This is something that we apply for with GFOA on an annual basis. It helps with our Moody rating. It helps with additional bonds. And we've consecutively received this every year since I've been here, and I know as Kate Mast, as a previous finance director, was here.
It's about 20 years.
20 years at least, yeah.
So it means we've been doing a good job and have a good bond rating?
It means that we've been doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Here goes.
I think that's worth taking a note.
I would. Kudos.
Thank you.
All right.
Congratulations.
Let's,
One other thing, Mr. Chair.
sure.
Right below that, Ms. Wilson, you're working on creating better internal control processes, and I'm just real briefly, what does that entail?
So every year, we always look at our internal control processes on how we can better them, whether it be in our department or other departments. On perfect examples of when the payables come in, we review those processes. We have, for example, the department head for each department will sign off and code those. When we get them, we make sure that that department head has signed off, coded it correctly. And then the accounts payable person will actually enter those bills, print out the checks, and then they come to me. And then I check them off again to just make sure. So it's just a process to make sure that, you know, everybody, it's following the correct chains to make sure that everything is done correctly. So every year we try to look at all of our processes to make sure, see if we can better anything, make something easier, or whatever we can do just to make it stronger.
Thank you.
That leads into another question. I remember reports of the transition between software that we previously had and new software that was implemented, I don't know, during your tenure, Mayor Mays. During that time, we were putting in new software. How is that working? Is it effective?
The software works really good. So every year we seem to utilize something new that they have and try to use all of our software as whatever they have to offer. So sometimes, you know, there'll be a little, you know, hiccup or something, and we will try to work through it. Currently right now, the last thing that we really have to work on is our PAF structure. And for the hiring process for Daniel's position, or for the human resources, for raises and things like that, to try to get it through the computer system. So we're still continuing to work on trying to better our system, make it more electronic and make it easier for all department heads. But it has gone very well, I feel like.
Excellent. Well, if people are reaching out to use your services, that's a good sign, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. All right. I'm going to move on if no one else has any other questions in this area. Let's move on to personnel. This is on page 30.
Our Human Resources Director, Daniel Hunter, will present this department.
Thank you very much, Chair McLaughlin, and hello, Budget Committee. On the HR, or Human Resources Department budget, there's really two areas that have changed significantly, and I say that as a percentage of what they used to be, and I'll just draw your attention to the recruitment and hiring line, as well as the employee relations line. The recruitment hiring line is increased significantly just because we're budgeting for recruitment of a city manager when Julie Kruger retires possibly next year. The other is on the employee relations line. There's two increases that are in the blue on page 33. One is $15,000, and one is 8,000. I'll address those separately. The 15,000 is a reimbursement amount of money, and that is from our health insurance provider. They provide us with an incentive to help employees improve their health and wellness. And so when an employee does something, this year I'm going to focus on preventative health, largely because preventative health and our lack of a urgent care in the Dalles, both of those things contribute to higher premium increases for medical insurance. Those are primary leaders. The other thing just has to do with the demographics issues that we're never going to be able to address, and I shouldn't try, frankly. So what happens is an employee goes out and we'll say, for an instance, they go out and get preventative care. The healthcare provider says this employee got preventative care and is entitled to a $25 gift card for doing so. And so I get them a $25 gift card. I send the receipt to the healthcare provider or the insurance provider. They send us back a reimbursement check for that amount. In order to do that, I have to have the money budgeted on that line to even do the transaction in the first place. It is that $15,000 is reimbursed. So I just wanted to be aware that it's not just $15,000 that's going to go out into thin air. The $8,000 for employee relations, that is the amount that's typically budgeted on that line. It is higher, and the reason is because we budgeted I believe 6,000 or 4,500 last year, and we ended up going well over that. And part of the reason was this year was the first year we've actually had nominations for employee appreciation since I've been in this position, and we ended up having 3 employees that were nominated for awards, and that ends up costing money. And it was a $100 gift card and a plaque. And so paying those 3 employees, in addition to providing some incentive to employees or appreciation to employees in general, which is typically done over the holidays with a turkey or ham. This year, because of COVID, we couldn't get together with turkey and ham things, so we ended up doing gift cards for all employees rather than going the turkey and ham route. So anyway, that $8,000 is because this year we ended up going over what we projected, or what I projected on that line, largely because of those 2 factors. And rather than go on over the line again this coming year, I decided to budget some more on it. It ended up, as far as the whole fund went, it didn't end up hurting us at all because I saved money in other areas. So as far as the whole budget went, we were fine. Other than that, I think everything is pretty on par for normal, as normal can be, as far as expenditures go. Does anybody have any questions?
Anyone? I would like a little bit more information on reduced city liability and improved employee safety. I have been on the council for a while, and I know at one time we had some safety issue things happening that was not good for the city, but that has improved greatly. Explain.
Yeah, so when I started, we started off, when I started as HR director, we didn't have a citywide safety program or a safety officer. Our experience rating, which the insurance company uses to establish our premiums, was at 1.67. And we had a safety officer that was only in public works that was combined with regulatory compliance manager. We split that position, created a 3/4 time safety officer. That position's now grown into a full-time position. And our experience rating since then has gone down to, for the coming year, it's now 0.78. And so that's, you take the total payroll for the city, total number of employees, and then do some other math, and then you times it by 0.78. 1.0 is considered normal. And so anytime you get below 1.0, it's good. And we've been below 1.0 for now 4 years. And it continues to go downward trend.
Excellent.
What that also means is employees are safer at work. Employees that are safer at work come back the following day when they're scheduled to work, and they continue to do so. If they are injured, their injuries are less severe, and they have the proper equipment and materials to do it safely.
Excellent. Any other questions in this area? Julie, I remember that FICA had some monies that were returned that were unused because of our safety. Do you remember what those were? We're making yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, did you want to know where those were in the budget?
No, it's just the fact that we have been experiencing revenue that has been returned to the city
We do
because
get
of the,
dividends back, and as our experience rating continues to be reduced as the dividends follow that, and we get less of a return each year, but we do put those in a line item to use for the purpose of safety of the employees. So it could be training, equipment, security. We've approved a variety of uses for that. And if you need a detailed list, we can
No.
provide that for you tomorrow.
no, but I do remember the officers needed wearable cameras. And I think that's part of what we use some of those funds for. So it's appropriately being spent.
Yes.
That's the point I wanted to make. All right, anything else on this area? Then we will move on, please.
Actually, Chairman
Yes, yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes,
I have a question. It may not be appropriate. That's actually my question. I'd like to discuss at some point BIP 21015, which is a number of either wage increases or step increases. I'm a little unclear on that.
tell me reference number to which page.
It's the PDF page is 278. I don't know what document page it's on.
Yes,
278.
Daniel, would
back
you
in the
like
BIPs.
Daniel, would you like to provide an overview of that budget issue paper?
Sure.
Thank you.
Issue of paper, that's at the end, right?
Yep.
Yes, all right.
My question goes to, I don't know when the appropriate time to discuss that is, in that it's sort of baked into the budget across a number of departments. But I believe that Mr. Hunter might be the gentleman to shed the most light on it.
I would be happy to address that right now. So the budget issue paper 21-015, typically or annually when we do the budget, we also present a COLA or proposed COLA increase for exempt employees. Union employees, COLA is addressed in both of their contracts. We have two unions. One is SEIU, the other is Police Association. So exempt employee COLA is addressed separately, and that's part of this budget issue paper. The proposed cost of living allowance for exempt employees is 2%. Both organized labor get, both the unions get 2.5%. Typically on an annual basis, I look at Western Regional now CPI to get a ballpark to base the recommendation on. And I do that in February. This year, I got the budget issue paper out a little bit early, so the number or the review was actually for December 2020, and that was at 1.5 CPI for Western Regional. I looked at it this morning, and it's up to 2.4% for Western Regional, and going up pretty sharply. I would guess largely based off of fuel and food costs due to delivery costs for the food. So that's part of the budget issue paper. The other part of the one other part of the budget issue paper is city council stipends. And then the last piece of that is a wage adjustment for several positions. And this is based off of a Roseburg wage survey that we participated in. And since this is typical, if you participate in a wage survey, the city that's doing the survey sends you the results. And so we participated in this survey. we got the results, and through the data that we found, we had several positions at the city that were significantly undercompensated relative to their peers in the state. And I believe you were sent a salary table this afternoon that should have gone along with this budget issue paper. And the blue positions are the ones that have changed. They've moved up lines basically. And typically when we do step increases, we're going from left to right on that wage table. Those positions, go ahead.
So this would not be, and it's a number, right? I don't have the table in front of me because I can't look at that and look at the Zoom at the same time. But
Yeah.
regardless, it's what is it, 10 people or some fairly, it's more than one or two. It's fewer than 15 or 20. It's some number of step increases or wage increases.
For wage adjustments, there's 14 positions.
All
Some
right.
of those positions are going to have, let me just make sure that it's covering one position, one person in that position. So I don't want to misspeak. So yeah, 13 positions, 13 people. The wage adjustments. So the position they're in currently is undercompensated compared to their peers for the same position.
Right. So the BIP includes the survey or some of the survey data. There are ranges for all of these different kinds of positions. What's the methodology or the rationale for defining them as undercompensated? What's the goal that you are asking us to shoot for as a policy for compensating exempt employees, in other words?
Well, I think the numbers we came up with, and this was through discussion with Julie Kruger, was looking at the average wage for those positions that are in the study relative to the same position we had at the city and seeing where we were compared to what the survey showed.
So like the 50th percentile or the mean of the survey. Is that right? We're shooting for the middle of the survey range?
Actually, I think it was looking at the average. I could be wrong on that, but Julie will correct me if I am. The average, if you're looking at the actual survey data, the average is the third line over. And
So for instance, the human resources director position, I'm recommending that be moved up, and it tops out at an amount that is just less than the average. So it looks like we're moving them up somewhat drastically, they're still barely meeting that average that we have in the survey, which is pretty comparable to the 50th percentile if you look across.
Right. I haven't gotten to my opinion on that. I don't even know if I have a strong opinion on that. What I'm trying to get is that we have some clarity, because we're setting a what looks like a new policy for how we're paying a number of exempt employees. My guess is this may well come back and be brought up by other employees that we are looking at some methodology. And I just want to be clear or get some clarity on what that is. So
this is not a new policy, if I may. This is how every time we have to negotiate a union agreement, we also develop the salaries. So we go out and we have salary surveys that are provided. Those unions have the opportunity to renegotiate salaries every 3 years. The reason why this is, I think, so glaring is that the exempt don't have that opportunity. And I can tell you it's been probably a good 10 years since this has been looked at. So there are some pretty glaring changes if you just look at the numbers. But I think it's, no less important for the exempt employees to be paid according to their peers as it is for anyone else who works for the city.
Well, we certainly want to take care of our people, and we want to attract and retain good staff. We're blessed with good staff now. I agreed to all that. Again, I'm trying to just get in black and white, or get some clarity, at least in my own mind, what it is that we are aiming for. And it sounds like we're aiming for the average or the middle of the salary survey set of ranges. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry if I was roundabouting that.
Now we move forward to the BIP, the BIP, but let's come back now. Do we have any other questions of Mr. Hunter with Human Resources? Before we all, okay, and then the hearing none.
Mr. Chair? did you
Yes.
say that we're going to come back to this? Is that what you said?
I believe that this is probably going to reappear at a later date when we're back in that section.
This would be the appropriate time to complete the discussion.
All right. Any other discussion? Would you like to say something, Mayor Mays?
Oh, just to clarify that,
Sure.
I'm not, I would hope that everybody understands how this chart works that was given to us this morning. And that is that, and I'm only mentioning Public Works because it's the first position that's listed. So typically when you hire a Public Works director, under this scenario, he would come in at $94,500. And if he does a good job, at the end of 1 year, he would move up to $97,335, not including a COLA. So what we're trying to do here, as I understand it, is make these positions that are in blue, these 13 positions, commensurate with the other 22 cities in the survey. And our goal is to have these 13 positions achieve a 50% percentile when compared to those other 22 cities. So it's not so much that an employee might not be getting a 10% raise, it's the range that's going to go up that amount. Correct?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor.
Okay.
And the reason that we've only identified the ones in the blue font are because when we did the comparison against all the positions in the exempt plan, those were the only ones that were so out of whack with the study.
So
the rest were okay.
Pursuant to what Dan was suggesting is that it is our goal to pay exempt employees an average wage compared to people that do the similar job in those other 22 cities, average. We're not looking to pay them 30% more than the average or 20% below the average. We're looking at paying, and I know of cities that their goal is to pay their employees in the 75 percentile. And so we want to be in the 50 percentile.
Yeah, we want to stick with the average.
Right.
And I do want to point out that the two positions at the top of that pay table, the Public Works Director and the Police Chief, that even with the increase this year are well below what their peers are in the survey. And so we will be proposing additional increases next year to help bring them up. We just didn't want to hammer it or that big a jump in 1 year.
You're phasing in over 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah, incrementally, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What is the total cost of what you're proposing for this fiscal year and next fiscal year? For just this, for these 13 positions?
So the total cost of the increase with the benefits would be $201,900, which would be the difference. That's with the benefits and the food and the soda.
Do you have just the salary on there?
So this is the salary for this year. That's it. What we have and then is what we propose. That's the difference. Where would it?
So it's total 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So total 10% increase.
Those are going to be on different funds because some of these positions are general funds, some of them are in Public Works.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and that 201,000 is all the general fund, water, sewer, et cetera.
Okay. Any other comments, questions in this area? Or forever hold our peace. Moving on. We are now into planning.
Our Community Development Director, Alice Cannon, will present an overview of the Planning and Economic Development departments for you.
Good evening, Chair McLaughlin and members of the Budget Committee. I'm not the newest department head, but I'm among them. So I arrived and began this position taking over from retired Community Development Director Steve Harris. So I've been on the job since late August of 2020, and I'm really happy to be here. I unfortunately can't speak from experience and say what changed from last year. So I'll give you just a general overview, and then next year I can say what changed from last year. So in our department, we oversee the current planning, long-range planning, historic preservation, and renewal program, as well as economic development. That's all that's covered in our department. We provide support to the Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and the Urban Renewal Board. The Urban Renewal budget was considered in mid-April and approved by that budget committee earlier, and some members of this committee were part of that hearing. So with regard to our program, if you go to page 38, which provides the detail of our line items, the biggest area variable in our budget is really around contractual services. And that's where we focus on our special projects. And if you look at last year's budget, it was budgeted at $74,000. This year it's proposed at 67 and change. So what projects are part of that? Housing code amendments. We have a placeholder for if we need to provide additional funds to hire a consultant to help us as we finish up our housing code amendment project. We have ongoing support that we provide to the Fort Dalles Museum. We have the community vision consultant. We expect to, as part of the council goal setting in January of 2021 this year, there was a goal set to have a community vision update, and that will be funded in this budget, and we're projecting that. We also just have some miscellaneous consultant services if we need it, if issues come up this year. And then we have other contractual services, and that provides GIS support and some other just general software support. And those are the largest variables in our department. Primarily, this is a status quo, or it's going down a bit from last year. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about our program and about our budget.
Anyone? Questions? I've just been looking. What is a Wasco County Assessor map fee? Is that GIS? It's on, it's in the blue below engineering services. I'm just curious, base mapping.
Yeah, so we are part of, we get good base maps from the Wasco County Assessor. So the assessor provides, maintains mapping that identifies property owners for all of the cities, all the properties inside the city. And if lines change, all those maps change as well. So tax lots as well as platted lots, all of those maps. So this goes to pay for that.
Now, is that digital or is that a printed hard copy?
You know what? I don't know that, and I'd need to do a little research, and I can get
not
the
necessary.
answer back for you tomorrow.
Not necessary. I
would imagine it's digital.
Yeah. All right. Other questions for Alice? It seems straightforward. Yes.
One just really quick question. The community vision consultant, would that possibly have anything to do as well with urban or economic development and sort of the planning offices or planning departments part of that urban development?
Certainly, I believe that this would be an overarching community vision, and it should include economic development. It should include urban renewal. All of those things should be covered, and it would be an overarching guiding vision for the whole community that could be, and I think it would be really helpful and important for whoever's helping us guide this project to look into the urban renewal plan and look into the most recently adopted economic development plan.
Awesome, thanks.
Now, would that be a committee that would be set up underneath that person?
I'm new to the Dalles, and so I know over the years I think the vision process has been going since 1995 with updates every 10 or so years. And so the latest one was 2011. So I would imagine we're going to do something really similar. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie to maybe guide me on how that's gone in the past.
Thank you, Alice. So typically when we begin that process with whoever the consultant is that is selected, we'll work with staff and the city council to develop a process. It usually includes numerous workshops with community stakeholders, with schools, and all of our partners, so that we get a good community turnout. It might include surveys where people come and say, this is what we think is important for the community. So it's a pretty lengthy process, and they do, or at least in the past, have done an excellent job of getting community engagement.
Do we have anyone in mind, or a consulting firm, or that's still in the works?
Chair, no one in mind. I certainly in my career, I've worked with a variety of different consultants in this arena and could suggest some folks, but we would want to do a competitive process for this to select someone that meets our needs.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes, Mayor Mays.
This is for Alice or Julie, I guess, but following up on what ex-Mayor Lawrence was suggesting about economic development, when you look at our budget, do we have any money specifically budgeted for what you might call economic development, especially in terms of attracting businesses? And is that something that the Community Development Department is responsible for? I would think it was, but if we do that kind of thing.
Chair McLaughlin and Mayor Mays, good question. There is the next budget that I will be covering is our economic development budget. As far as where how those funds are distributed, that's up to this budget committee to give us goals. But we'll be covering the economic development budget in a minute here. Do you have anything to add on that, Julie?
Thank you, Alice. I was actually going to point out the same thing that you did, that you have funds in the next budget to discuss about strategies.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right, let's move on to the next economic development. And Julie, is this going to be you or Alice?
I'm going to start out, Chair McLaughlin,
right. Yes.
And members of the Budget Committee. Economic Development Budget is on page 40, and it's the detailed portion begins on page 43. So I'll turn to that now. As you can see, when you look at the detail, the contractual service line item is the largest area, and this is the part of the budget that funds our contribution to the Main Street program. And that's $25,000. And then some additional funds are reserved, $20,000 for projects that would implement our business retention strategy, our economic opportunity analysis work. And so we basically here in the Dalles have an economic development plan that was adopted. I believe it's dated 2018 or 2019, so it's fairly new. And that's a good, provides some very good basis and a foundation for our program. And so $20,000 is available in this proposed budget to fund that. In addition, there are some travel, food, lodging, conferences, training, and so forth. We do maintain memberships in the Economic Development Association of Oregon, OEDA, Oregon Economic Development Association. And then there's another one called AORA, which is the Urban Renewal equivalent, which is a statewide urban renewal agency association. So we try to stay networked in that program, and there are and have been some training opportunities available virtually this year. So the proposed budget is 49,000, of which I mentioned a big majority of that is covering the contractual services. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about this budget.
Do we have any questions? Councilman Runyon. Nope, you got to click on.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I think I brought up at a previous city council meeting when the chamber did their presentation that Main Street was negotiating sending that service of the tour boats back to the chamber. I don't know if that's been completed yet, but is part of this 25,000 to Main Street, was that about, was any portion of that regarding the tour boats, or is that in some other area?
The tour boats are in our transient room tax expenditures. It has still not been decided how that's going to work out yet. But because the chamber and the tour boats are all funded from the transient room tax, I think we won't really have any adjustments to make on that. This particular $25,000 under economic development for Main Street is just like a contribution that we make annually.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I noticed that on page 45, there's a codes enforcement, but there's no proposed. That means it was moved over to the police department.
That's
just a placeholder there. Got it. All right. That completes unless there's any other questions.
I'm going to ask one, if you don't mind, Chairman McLaughlin.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Director Cannon, I'm just thinking out loud here, so, you know, putting you on the spot in that sense, so I apologize, but be it as it may, our former mayor Lawrence had made the point that maybe we don't need any more studies, and I take that point, but I do wonder if there are 3 or 4 economic development questions that we might dig into specifically for downtown, things that have been talked about but might need a bit more study to bring forward, for instance, an ordinance or a yes or no kind of decision on an incentive program. And if that's the case, do you have any feelings on whether adding some funding to contractual services to hire those out, to contract out a couple of those economic development questions might be helpful?
Chair and Budget Committee Member Richardson, thank you for the question. You know, this is one of those areas, and I was talking to former Mayor Lawrence last week. He and I met, and I appreciated that conversation. And I'm new enough that I'm still in my learning curve and trying to understand the vision for economic development in this city. And what I will say is I know for one thing that the Community Vision Project will guide this. It will provide a very nice umbrella and to help guide where we want to go and what we want to be doing. I also know that we have some projects that are long overdue and that are going to create some to be completed in the urban renewal program that will directly impact downtown. So we're going to have the rec building that's going to be under construction this year. And we know that that will likely be finished. The storefronts will be finished or close to being finished by the end of this calendar year. We also know that First Street project is underway, will likely be under construction in summer 2023. And that's exciting. There's some on-site field work being done this week with our design team and the railroad and so forth. So they were out there meeting today. So that and then in addition to that, the urban renewal program is going to be taking some actions on the Tony's building site. So there will be some redevelopment opportunities happening, and it is a goal of urban renewal to look at the incentive programs, particularly to address council's goal, but also urban renewal board's goal to offer incentives and make sure that our incentives are directed in a manner, are written in a manner that will attract housing in the downtown. And so it's kind of an exciting time. We're going to have 3 projects underway, and maybe some more if this vision project comes to fruit with some more things for downtown. So it's an exciting time. I think this year is going to be about hopefully not doing too much study, but it's going to be about visioning and trying to have the council and community members tell us where they want us to go and maybe how we can deploy the resources in the best way. And I know urban renewal goals, we're going to be addressing the incentive programs heavily. And you already know that because you're on that board. So I don't know if I answered your question, and maybe Julie has something to add to this too.
Just briefly, a follow-up. Do you feel that we'll have the staff in place to be able to look at those incentive programs? Or I know there's sort of a heavy load that you have at the community development. Do you feel like you have the staff, or would we benefit from having additional contracted staff to look at some of those incentive and visioning questions?
Chair and board member Dan Richardson, I feel we are not proposing new staff with this budget. So no, I feel like we're adequately staffed. And in the urban renewal budget, we are funding, and it has been funded, some consulting services that will aid in getting some of those projects completed. So that for the project management services for the Tony's and building and the redevelopment in the downtown, consulting services for the First Street project to keep that project on track and moving with our partners on that project that include not only the city public works department, but also ODOT and the money, federal money we're getting. So I feel like there may be room in this budget. I'm looking at economic development if we need to, and we see a need identified in this coming year. We could use the $20,000 to bring on a consultant. I'm awaiting direction from this group, but maybe direction provided through the vision program as well. So
I'm just excited to get something moving along down there. So thanks for your answers.
That was an excellent response, by the way, and I'm losing connectivity up here. So if I lose, someone else needs to pick up, I guess, in case I go offline. I'm back. All right. Any other comments on that particular section of the book? All right, then let's move on. We are now to the police department and new chief.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our new police chief to all of you, Tom Worthy. Brand new. He's been on the job for about a week, so be nice. And Tom will give an interview of the police department budget, which will include animal control and codes enforcement.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Chairman McLaughlin, Mayor Mays, and members of the council. For the record, I am Tom Worthy. I'm the police chief of the city of the Dalles. I'm on my 6th day of the job, and so like any good police officer, if I feel like I might get into trouble, I will call for backup. And so with us is Captain Jamie Carrico, who has a deep understanding of this budget as well. So just as an overview of the police department, before we talk numbers, I want to let you know that there are 25 sworn law enforcement officers in the city of the Dalles. We're assisted by 5 unsworn support staff, only 2 of which are full-time. There are 7 enforcement programs and 11 non-enforcement programs, or sort of quality of life improvement programs. And the police department has many things to do. If you want to look at our goals and our upcoming vision for the department, that's listed on page 47 for those of you who are following along. One thing to note off of that page is the second to last bullet in accomplishments lists that we are fully staffed. That is no longer true since this budget was prepared. We're now down 1 police officer position, which is in recruitment right now to be filled. So going on to the budget summary sheet on page 48, Because the police department's budget is relatively large in terms of scale within the city, I highlighted a few items that I thought might be of interest. And of course, I'm willing to speak on all of them. And in fact, we can flip over to the budget detail sheets, which follow if you want to go into that level of depth. Regular salaries for the police department total $2.129 million, which does seem large. And we have a large by comparison, not for what you get. I think you get quite a good deal for what you're paying there. Overtime salaries are $126,300, which is on par with last year. That's primarily used for court appearances and unavoidable overtime, such as having a custody at the end of a shift, or other duties that a police officer might be called to where it's just simply unavoidable. All of that overtime is monitored on a day-to-day basis by the sergeants operationally in the field, and it flies up through the captain and then ultimately to the chief if an anomaly is spotted. So I don't see any area of concern there. It's in terms of the budget, a relatively large number. DUI overtime salaries, and then there's also a bilingual incentive of $12,845. There is a handful of Spanish speakers on the department, which is a good value add for the community. And they do receive a bilingual pay stipend in their check, which is covered with just under $13,000. So all totaled, our employee benefits and salaries is $3.631 million. Much of what you see here listed in terms of medical insurance, life insurance, workers' comp, FICA, and all of the other various numbers below that summary line are beyond the control of the police department. They're, of course, the cost of doing business for the city and the roll-up costs for that total of $3.6 million or slightly more. Moving down the summary sheet to materials and supplies, you'll see that Wasco County Communications is $367,000. That, of course, is our dispatch center, which is required to operate 24/7, 365 around the clock, and they can never be without service because that is the single sole point of contact for emergency services in the Dalles and Wasco County. They do have a budget allocation methodology there, which appoints cost by use, meaning those agencies with the highest use of the service pay the most. And by far, the Dalles City Police Department is the highest user of that service. So that number is $367,428, which is on par, a slight increase from the previous budget year. I took a note on the towing services line of $21,500. You may have noticed around town that there is issues with abandoned and derelict vehicles. Also, other towing services, like for instance, if a police car needs to be towed, would come out of this line item as well. And so that's what that is about. We're definitely not out there running out of gas all the time, or if we get a flat tire, we'll change it ourselves. So that's what that's about. Okay. Can everybody still hear me okay? I'm getting an echo.
Debbie Ferrer, I think you listed twice.
Yep.
Can you mute, please? There you go. I think that will solve that. All right.
Okay. Moving along to vehicles, which is something that we'll discuss more in a little while. We do budget $20,000 for vehicle maintenance, and for certain, keeping our patrol vehicles safe for what we ask out of them. 20,000 is certainly reasonable. There's other line items, both for tires as well as oil changes and filters. So it is incumbent on us and money well spent to keep our fleet both safe and functioning because we are thin there. And being without a car, should it be wrecked or down for service or maintenance, is impactful on our ability to respond to emergencies within the community. So oil changes alone, other things, 39,000, and then tires and other minor tire repairs, $7,000 is listed there as well. I found it interesting that we budget for elevator maintenance, 2,800. I think that that's required by code, but somebody more familiar with elevators than I could probably speak to that. Moving down, there's $10,000 on the line for travel, food, and lodging. Of course, it's important for our police department to train. We're required to maintain certifications and also to be a member of the greater law enforcement community in the state of Oregon. So some of our traveling will be conferences and other various trainings, and there is tuition listed on the line below that to the tune of just under 10,000 at 9,700. Ammunition cost has remained flat at 9,000. I looked at that budget line specifically because for the shooters on the call, you'll note that ammunition costs have really risen in the last year or two. And the Dalles Police Department has thankfully found a way to keep that line item level. So good work there. Clothing was budgeted at $18,160 for the year, and that does seem like a lot, but this shirt that I'm wearing, I think costs $85. We are expensive in the equipment that we use, and to put forth a professional look and appearance and to keep our police officers safe with vests and other equipment and leather that isn't completely worn out. That's what that line item is about. So that total for the materials and supplies is $787,000. And then moving down to the next line item for $155,000 for buildings, vehicles, and other miscellaneous equipment. That's the budget overview page, and the summary supports that, which is the next handful of pages. And on that, I had just a couple of notes. Computer software, if you look at page 51, you'll note that there is $17,000 for AT&T FirstNet mobility data. And if anybody's wondering what that is the data connection that keeps our mobile data terminals, our in-car computers connected with dispatch. And it adds to the operational command and control and situational awareness for our officers in the field. And AT&T is a corporate partner with the federal government to establish a nationwide high-speed data network. And the Dalles Police Department participates in that, which I was very happy to see. And so far, it seems to be working well. And then if you flip to page 52, everybody always is interested in vehicles because they are public facing and they are noteworthy for our community. And they're also quite expensive. We do have a budget impact paper. Is it impact or was that another term? There's one in there, you know what I mean? To add one patrol car to the department. And then there are two of our City of the Dalles Police Department SUVs that are due to life cycle out, both of which are sitting around 75,000 miles right now. And by the time we can go through the process to order the car, have it delivered, built, put together, stickers, cage, lights, radio, camera, everything else that goes in it, we think that those two cars will actually go out the back end at about 90,000 miles. That's a lot for a city police car. The general sort of rule of thumb is whatever it says on the odometer. If it's in law enforcement work, you go ahead and double that. So they're significantly up there, which supports that line item for vehicle maintenance. There's also a budget impact paper in the back to upgrade the or to continue a project that was previously scheduled to upgrade the interview room technology, the cameras and voice recorders for our criminal interview room here. I went back there and took a look at it to see what the need was. And I felt as though I had stepped back in time. And so this is a project that does need to go forward, update that technology and make it dependable, reliable, and everything that people expect and experience on a day-to-day basis, just, through their interaction with their cell phone, they can expect greater technology than what we have back there. So that's my report. I'm certainly happy to take questions. Before I do, I look to Jamie for anything that I overlooked that you feel might be important.
Yeah, just real quick, there was an increase. We're asking for more body cameras this year. This is our first full fiscal year of having body cameras, and that comes with trials and tribulations. And we found that in overlapping of shifts, some of the cameras aren't charged enough. Some guys are going out on calls without body cameras. Detectives don't have body cameras. And I think that that's just a good way to make sure that we're all covered, is to get more body cameras so they're charged, ready to go. And so everybody that's on a call has one.
Thank you for that. You're right. I overlooked that. And so we are using WatchGuard mobile video body cameras, which are deployed to the patrol fleet. It would be great if everybody wore one and that they were all available all the time. Additionally, having a spare or two on the dock makes good sense, because once again, we are going to break things. And that's one of the things that we're definitely going to break. If you start rolling around on the ground or elsewhere with your body camera, it's likely to get broken. So it's a modest increase to the tune of, like, I think, was it 6 or 8 cameras for availability. But really, in terms of police technology, that hardware is not the concern. The concern is storage. And right now, our storage contract is very advantageous for the city, and other police departments have not executed the program as well as what I'm seeing here. So good news all the way around on that. So with that, I digress. Look to City Manager Kruger for any updates or anything else that I may have forgotten.
Thank you, Chief. Would the Budget Committee like the Chief to go through the codes enforcement and animal control before you ask questions, or did you want to ask questions about the police section first?
I have a quick
Comments?
question.
Yeah, Chief, or Rich Mays, Mayor.
We probably should have asked you this during your interview, but what do you think about K-9 unit?
Well, Chair McLaughlin, Mayor Mays, K-9 units, I think it depends on what kind of K-9 you're talking about. If you're talking about an emotional support dog, I think that's probably a great idea and fairly safe and low risk. If you're talking about a detection dog, probably the same play. And if you talk about a tracking or a bite dog, I can tell you that they're both expensive, time consuming, and every deployment's a lawsuit. So I would be very reticent, unless there was a strong community call for it, to go in that direction.
Is that pretty much the trend in police departments? The last one that you mentioned?
Yes, sir, I think it is. I do not see the K-9 units that I used to. I think that the entities that maintain that program have deep pockets, because once again, it's definitely a payout every time you use it, no matter how justified.
Right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, questions? I have a couple. Several years ago, we did a replacement of radio because there were some dark spaces. Their officers wouldn't be able to communicate. We did a corrective action on that. Captain Carrico, do you have an update? How are those radios working?
Yeah, I don't want to say flawless, because nothing's ever flawless, but I'll tell you it's night and day from it was prior to that. We can actually talk on our portable radios from inside Fred Meyer or inside Home Depot. So they're working well. So as you remember, that was 3 to 4 years ago. So we're working on a process of getting new portable radios, but as of now, it's working well. And the portable radios will be coming shortly, not this budget year, but maybe next.
All right, I like hearing that. And then the second thing I have is on page 49, the Youth Services Work Crew. I see we have 13,000. We did not utilize them the past year due to COVID, correct?
Chair McLaughlin, that
Yes.
is the city's contribution toward the salary that we partner with Wasco County for coordinating that service. It's not funds that we use to pay for particular graffiti removal or something like that. It's staff support.
Got it. All right, that answers that question then. Any other questions on this particular area? All right, I see that we're approaching 7:30. Manager Kruger, is that time to pause and come up with a plan for continuing?
Yes, that is true. I think if you would like, I think it would only take a few minutes for the chief to go through the other 2 sections that are part of his department, and then maybe we pause until tomorrow and begin with technology.
I like that plan. Chief Worthy, would you like to continue in codes enforcement.
Yes, sir. I think I can get through it relatively quickly. So Chair McLaughlin, this Dalles City Police Department also is the home for one codes enforcement full-time employee. If I'm informed correctly, that employee was transferred over from Public Works. That person is housed here at the police department, and the budget for that is simply one FTE with associated costs, including a vehicle. So there's nothing more to report than that, except that the program seems to be working within the police department, and there is a strong partnership between the codes enforcement officer and the neighborhood enforcement action team officer upstairs, and they are working closely together to address quality of life issues, things like, again, abandoned vehicles or trashy areas, homeless camps and stuff like that. So in my estimation, from what I've seen in my last 6 days, I think it's a good fit, and it does appear to be working. And again, because I'm at the end of that presentation, I look to Captain Carrico for additional details, if any.
Not much detail. I just want to put on record that it's been a great move. I think that position, we both benefit from her being, from codes enforcement being here and having that close contact with the police department.
Now, as the code enforcement officer, is that a certified or licensed position, or does she go through police training?
Not police training, but she's certified to use computer data or law enforcement databases in her line of work. But it's a civilian position.
I understand. Any other questions or comments? I see none. Chief, would you proceed on?
Yes, Chair McLaughlin, the conclusion of my remarks around animal control program, much like codes enforcement, there is one FTE that operates in animal safety and enforcement within the city, also housed within the police department. And that person has expenses surrounding one vehicle as well. There's not much more to report than that. It's the animal enforcement officer, and I do feel like the city is attaining good value for money there as well. In reading the operational logs for the last several days, I can tell you that the number of animal calls is frequent, and should we not have an animal enforcement person with specialized skills and abilities and some equipment, we would be sending police officers to those calls, and they have higher value things that they can be attending to. So happy to see that that program is here, and it looks like the budget for it is sort of a sideways step, not a lot added there.
Excellent. Anything else to add or any questions? All right, I turn it back to you, Julie. So,
thank you, Chair McLaughlin. So the proper way to conclude this evening would be to recess the meeting to tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. And may I just confirm with the city clerk that the login for tonight continues to be the login for the rest of our meetings. Is that correct, Isaiah?
Izetta?
I'll verify that. If it's different, we'll send something out. I think it's the same for all of our meetings.
And the password is the same.
I believe so.
All right.
If there's anything different, we will notify. Oh, there she is.
It is the same. My little button isn't working on here, so I had to do it a different way.
Thank you.
Yes, it's this exact same. So we didn't have to send out new pages every day.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, then I will go ahead and recess tonight's meeting and reconvene tomorrow night at 5:30, same time, same bat channel.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned.
Recessed.
Recessed. Okay.